Welcome to Green Dot Daily. I'm Maria Marino, live every weekday at 3 Eastern on the Action app and YouTube channel. Today on the show, whole lot of hoops. Mike Calabrese will share his best bet for men's college basketball. But first, a ton of NBA to get to. And let's start with a look at who's leading the way for major awards. Nikola Jokic is the favorite for MVP. Victor Wembanyama heavily favored to win Rookie of the Year. Rudy Gobert on track to win his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award. Malik Monk now the favorite for Sixth Man, and Mark Daigneault the front runner for Coach of the Year.
He's going to go on and on and on about the rest and how everybody's on back-to-back.
How dare you put words in his mouth?
They celebrated like they won a championship. I got to find some type of way to fade them.
LA nightlife is undefeated.
Call me a hater if you want.
Yeah, these guys are too soft, man. I keep saying it.
That's why it's true, because it makes me look smart.
Time for more money with Matt Moore and Jay Money. All right, let's talk about some futures that have value. Matt, we'll start with you. What's one that you're betting right now?
Yeah, so I like Joe Mazzulla, coach of the Boston Celtics, to win Coach of the Year at 20-1. You mentioned the Daigneault, the front runner and the leader and the favorite, and that makes a lot of sense. The Thunder have the youngest roster in the league, and they're on pace to win the Western Conference. I wrote about that over on Action Network. You can find it in the app about why I think the Thunder are going to win the 1 seed. However, look, if the Celtics win 65 games, which is not in any way, shape, or form going to be difficult for them to get to, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the voters to reward them somehow. Jason Tatum's numbers don't stack up in any way, shape, or form with Nikola Jokic or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Luka Doncic or Giannis Antetokounmpo. Tatum's had a fine year, but if you really kind of look at it, he actually hasn't as good as last year. It's more about how good the Celtics are as a team. Mazzulla, on the other hand, is going to have coached this team to one of the best records we've seen over the last 10, 15 years in his second season head coaching, when he was kind of thrust into the role last year after the suspension and later firing of Ime Udoka. So at 20-1, I just think the voters are going to have a little bit of, wait, are we really not going to give anything to the Celtics? Are we really not going to reward this at all? Like, no, Drew Holiday can't win Defensive Player of the Year. Derek White can't win Defensive Player of the Year. White's starting, so we can't win Sixth Man. Really, we're not going to give anything to this team. So I think Joe Mazzulla is actually live here. If you look back, the number of coaches that have won 60-plus games and won the award, there's a very strong correlation there. You have to win a ton of games in order to outpace the other candidates that are like surprising or better than expected, which Daigneault definitely does qualify for. So at 20-1, I do think there's value in putting money on Joe Mazzulla.
I really like the look, especially when you consider that a lot of people aren't talking about Tatum for MVP. And Jay, what about you?
Well, first off, I mean, does this convince me? What a breakdown by Matt there. He's convinced me, and it makes perfect sense as well. You have to give them some type of award, and like you said, Tatum's not doing good enough to win MVP. We don't think he's going to win MVP, and obviously, I think that SGA is going to win MVP. I think that's what has the most value right now. If they finish with a better record than the Denver Nuggets, which I think that they will, even though the Nuggets are kind of surging right now, if they finish with a better record, you have to give SGA the MVP. I mean, you don't have to, but I think he's going to get it there. And with that being said, if SGA gets MVP, you don't want to give them MVP and Coach of the Year as well. And that number is too long there for Joe Mazzulla. So what a breakdown by Matt. I mean, he's talked me into it. I got to put a little something on that. But for me, I'm serious though. But SGA MVP at plus 250. Obviously, he's the runner-up. But I think as long as you're getting anything more than plus 2-1, anything higher than plus 200, I think SGA is going to end up getting the MVP this year.
Matt, why don't you give us your approach to betting MVP?
Yeah, so I'm a position better. I'll bet all throughout the year. I've got a pretty big portfolio that I've added to throughout the season. I have a big position on Shai already, but I keep looking at this, expecting the moment to come for me to hedge, and it hasn't hit yet. I gotta say, if I was taking, let's say we're gonna do a 5-unit play on the board, I would do 3 units on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at plus 255 to win 3.25 units. That to me gets you in a very good position. It's gonna be way more than that based off of where the numbers are at. So you come out with a big profit there. I'm with Jay. I think Shai's gonna win. I think Shai's gonna be the winner. He's number 2 in the straw poll. Guess what? The second guy in the straw poll is one of that straw poll in the season has won the last 2 seasons. There's gonna be a lot of momentum. I would put 1 unit on Giannis Antetokounmpo. I know that sounds crazy given how the Bucks have kind of performed this year, but the Bucks are starting to roll. You're seeing that now. They're getting it together, and the numbers do stack up. Giannis is averaging 30 points per game on 60% shooting from the field. Nobody's ever done that. So that's going to be a big push for him. And then I would maybe put 1 unit on Luka Doncic. Back-to-back losses versus the Pacers and Cavaliers, that's tough. But the Mavs still are a much better team after their trades. If they're able to get to the 4 seed, say, there's going to be a lot of conversation about him because he's leading the league in points, 34 per game, and he's averaging 7 and 9. Like, the numbers are ridiculous for Luka Doncic. He's near a triple-double, averaging 34 points per game. Even in this offense expanded, hyperinflated era of the NBA, those numbers are absolutely bonkers. So I would do 3 units on Shai at plus 255, a unit on Giannis, and 1 on Luka.
Interesting strategy. And neither of you are interested in betting Nikola Jokic. So, Jay, what does that come down to for you?
Yeah, I just want to say that I kind of told people that the Bucks are about to surge. I just wanted to pat myself on the back there. I'm just saying. But personally, now Jokic, it's just one of those cases where it's like Michael Jordan and LeBron James. He probably could win it every year, but nobody wants to see the same player win it every year. So if he did win it this season, it would be him getting it 3 out of the last 4 seasons. And I just like to see some new blood in there, in my opinion here. So like I say, I'll reiterate it again, if the Thunder finish with a better record than the Nuggets, you kind of have to give it to SGA. He has the most 30-point games so far this season, and he's number 1 in steals. And that means a lot to me because that means that he's one of the best two-way players in the NBA. Not just offensively, but making an impact to his team offensively and defensively here. So, I'm not buying Jokic. I'm glad that he's still at the favorite, and I'm glad that SGA is still at plus 2 to 1 as well. So I'm still riding with SGA to be the clear-cut MVP here.
And Matt, just to sort of clarify, what is your main reasoning as to why not Jokic?
Yeah, so I think part of this is just where the number's at. I don't think there's value there. I think sometimes you have to be willing to lose, even if you're building a multi-bet position. I think you have to be willing to lose, and I just do not see it for Jokic. And the reasons are, one, the Nuggets are surging right now. He's played phenomenal out of the All-Star break. That game on Sunday versus the Warriors was an absolute, just incredible performance. It was a symphony from him. However, they're going to push through this next 10 days or so, and the Nuggets are going to downshift. Michael Malone's openly said that the number 1 seed is not their priority. They're not going to chase that. OKC will. And as they start to kind of tail off, Jokic will probably miss some games. Jamal Murray will miss some games. They'll downshift in their effort. They will not burn like they have throughout from the All-Star break all the way through. They're going to push themselves to where they're going to make sure that they get a top 3, top 4 seed, and then they're going to coast out. If you look at Jokic's numbers, he's always been the advanced stats darling. Not as much this year. He does lead in BPM, but a lot of the other advanced metrics, it's either neck and neck with him and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, or Jokic is behind. And when he's not as dominant, when you start to stack him up versus these other candidates, as the voters will do, you're going to reach kind of a different conversation. And maybe that means that they go for Luka because of the pure numbers, or they go for Shai because of if he winds up with more wins, which I think he will. But I think there will be enough to kind of indicate this. Also, Jay mentioned the voter fatigue. It is real. And it's also real, I think, when mostly it's, what are we really going to call the story of this season? Ramona Shelburne, who's a voter, has kind of talked about that. What's been the story this season? I don't think you can say that it's been Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. I think the Thunder, having the youngest average age in the league, finishing with a number 1 seed in the Western Conference, that's a pretty big story in the NBA this season. So I do think Shai's got a better chance. I do think that there's no chance for a couple of candidates that have been mentioned, like Jason Tatum and Kawhi Leonard. I do not think those guys have a chance. And so all of that kind of combined, I do think that Jokic is further behind in this race than what the straw poll indicated a few weeks ago and what the odds makers believe.
Fair enough. And OKC, certainly a bigger story right now, partly because the Nuggets already won their championship a season ago. I'm not saying it can't happen again, but it definitely feeds into that narrative. All right, let's wrap this up with a pick for tonight. Jay, who you got?
This was my bookets play overnight, if you guys listen to the podcast over there, but I'm rocking with the Indiana Pacers in this one, minus the 5.5. This is a turnover spot for the Pacers in a rare ESPN game. And so it's a bounce back J spot as well, coming off that loss versus the Raptors. This is the 4th straight home game for the Pacers. So they hadn't really had to fly anywhere, used to their same gym. But more than that, this is an absolute horrible spot for the Pelicans. It's their first game playing 5th game of 5 games in 7 nights type of spot. This is a spot that I'll take every single time. This is a horrible spot. Back to back, roll back to back. 3 games in 4 nights. 4th game in 6 nights. 5th game in 7 nights for the Pelicans here. I think they're going to be running on fumes. I'm rocking with the Pacers in this one, full game. And lastly, the Pacers are not the type of team that you want to play in this type of spot with the way that they run up and down the floor. I think they run the Pelicans off the floor in this one. Rocking with the Pacers tonight. Let's go Pacers.
I could see it. Love me a bounce back J spot. And also, take a look at those Eastern Conference standings. Like the bottom half of the playoff teams, they're all neck and neck. Pacers, they need to start picking it up here. So J Money, Matt Moore, always great to have you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Check out the top 5 longest game-winning buzzer beaters in the NBA three-point era. Number 5 in 2010, that was Tyreke Evans for the Kings from 50 feet away. Nothing but net to take down the Grizzlies. 3 of his 21 points on the night. Number 4, going back to Dr. J in 1986, Julius Erving buried this winner from 53 feet to bury the Dallas Mavericks, who are going to appear on this list twice, by the way. Number 3, flashback to 1992, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf for the Nuggets from 55 feet. And it is absolute cash to beat the LA Clippers. Number 2 now belongs to Max Strus. After Tuesday night, the 59-footer was pure to put away the Mavericks. He had also drained 4 threes prior to that in the 4th quarter, just on one. And number 1 is this ridiculous shot from Devontae Graham in 2021 for the Pelicans from 61 feet, stunning the OKC Thunder. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just cannot believe it. Look who's back on Green Dot Daily. Chris Raybon, our first NBA segment of the year together. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Maria. Happy to be back. Happy to be back.
Well, after that heartbreaker last night in Cleveland, the Mavericks are now in Toronto. You think they can recover?
I do, Maria. I think that this just sets up as a prime letdown spot for the Toronto Raptors and a bounce back spot for the Dallas Mavericks. You know, this Raptor team, they've won 3 in a row. They've covered 4 straight, but we know this Toronto team is still, it's still a work in progress. We'll put it that way. Their negative 3.8 against the spread margin following a win is still the worst in the NBA, despite, stringing together a little streak here. And over the last 4 games, Toronto is shooting 51% from the field. We know that's going to come back down to earth. This is not a 51% shooting team, but their defense, I think their defense, we have a pretty large sample that tells us that it's not very good. Since the trade with the Knicks, so essentially since the new year, Toronto allowing 120.5 points per game. That is not the recipe for success when you want to go up against Dallas and Luka, who looks like he's going to play with the nose injury and all those guys. And Dallas has been pretty good on the second night of a back-to-back 6-3 against the spread this year. They've lost 2 straight, but 15-9, 63% against the spread off a loss this year. That's top 5 in the NBA. I just don't think Toronto has the horses to guard up on Luka and Kyrie in this one. So I think Dallas can put up a big number, even though they'll probably be a little bit tired and they're on the road. I just think Toronto is due for a letdown, and Dallas is still playing hard. They're gonna bounce back here.
Yeah, I could see that. I really like this look, and I just imagine that Luka especially probably has like a bad taste in his mouth after last night. And by all accounts, like the Mavs should have won that game if not for Max Strus actually like turning into a superhuman. And speaking of, the Cavs also have to play again tonight. Feels like so many teams, by the way, are having back-to-backs like in this week or so following the All-Star break. But how do you think they're going to do in Chicago?
Yeah, so this is the dog days and weird things happen. So I'm going to take the points. I'm going to take the points at home with the Chicago Bulls team. Now, the one thing about this is I think Chicago has enough perimeter defense, to at least limit Mitchell a little bit. They held him to 8 for 21 shooting in a 3-point win a couple of weeks ago. And he's just 7 for 20, 35% against Dosunmu and Caruso this season. However, Caruso did pop up on the injury report. So if he's out, I like Chicago a bit less. I would hope that the line then jumps over, 6 for me to jump in. But if Caruso's in, I love the spot. Chicago 7-4-1 against the spread as a home dog this year. They're covering by 3.5 points per game in those spots. This is the final revenge spot. I know Jay Money and Sean Little talked about it on the Buckets podcast. Great pod. Everybody should go listen to it. But Chicago 0-3 against Cleveland this year. This is their final spot for revenge. You always like that. And I think we're at the point, Maria, where this Cavs team starting to get a little bit overvalued. Like, they're 38-19, and they started 15-9-2 against the spread as a favorite. But since they're just 4-9 against the spread as a favorite. So that kind of shows you that, the market has kind of been investing. People want to bet the Cavs, and they really have not been profitable. Their last 15 games, they've won 12 of them. They're 12-3 straight up in their last 15, but just 6-9 against the spread. So this is a spot where you're getting enough points here where Cleveland could still win this game and Chicago cover. But I do think Chicago matches up well as long as Caruso's in the game.
I think it's a great point about the market kind of catching up to Cleveland at this point, and then the Bulls looking for that bounce back too after losing to the Pistons last time out.
Yeah.
But Chris Raybon, good to have you back. I'm sure we're going to be doing this a lot more down the stretch of the NBA season.
Always a pleasure.
Don't look now, but the Heat are up to 5th place in the Eastern Conference standings. They're on a 5-game win streak. 4 of those wins coming by double digits, 8-2 in their last 10 games, net rating 4th best in the NBA, and defensive rating 2nd best in the NBA during that span. Our analyst Bryan Fonseca joins us now. Would never want to count out the Heat fully, but are you buying them as a true threat in the East?
I placed the future this morning on them to win the East. And I had a couple before the season began when it looked like they were going to get Damian Lillard. But those are still sitting there somewhere on sportsbooks. But I mean, look, they're doing it again. 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whenever it was, after I was thinking, yeah, they're probably not going to make the run this year. And then, they trade for Terry Rozier and it looks clunky at first because he comes into a situation where they're losing a lot of games. Now, all of a sudden, they're 9-2 of their last 11. They've won, I don't know, however many straight road games at this point, quietly, have the 3rd best road record in the NBA. And they have the historical sort of factors in their favor where they have the most playoff wins in the NBA over the last 4 years with 38. They have the most playoff series wins in the NBA over the last 4 years with 8. They have 2 finals appearances over the last 4 years, the only team in the NBA that has that. This all coincides with when Jimmy Butler got there and when Bam Adebayo emerged into being a 3-time All-Star, which I don't think a lot of people projected. And you look at, other teams in the Eastern Conference, we're still shaky on the Cavs. The Knicks are banged up. And while we do expect them to get healthy, we don't know what that's going to look like or when they're going to get healthy at this point because they're sort of free-falling a little bit. Joel Embiid is out, and we don't know what's that going to mean for the Sixers if and when he comes back. If they're even going to be in the playoffs still, they might be in the play-in. And then you have the Celtics who look like juggernauts, but the Heat have beat them twice over the last 4 years in the playoffs. The Bucks as well, they look good, better now with Doc Rivers, but the Heat have beat them 2 of the last 4 years in the playoffs. So the factors are all sort of right there, along with the fact that they're starting to defend better. They're elite defensively in the month of February, one of the best in the NBA. And out of the All-Star break, they had the 3rd easiest schedule the rest of the way. And oh, by the way, they probably have the deepest team of the Jimmy Butler era right now. And all of these factors are sort of being like, hey, now the Heat, they might make this run and they might be dangerous again in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I hear you sort of using a bit of process of elimination with them as well. And you talked about just looking at the East as a whole. I noticed the Knicks, for instance, have shorter odds than the Cavs right now. So that's plus 850 or so compared to plus 1,000, even though the Knicks have fallen off a bit due to those injuries. So is this just a matter of, okay, they beat them a season ago?
Yeah, I would say so, because like, look, if you're the Cavs are one of these teams, like, I don't mind being late to the party on them. They're gonna have to prove it, right? The reason why people like the Heat is because of their playoff resume. The reason why people like the Knicks is because they profile as a team that's going to be good in the playoffs. And oh, by the way, they smashed the Cavs last year when the Cavs were favorites to win that series and had home court advantage, and it didn't matter. And I'm looking elsewhere in the Eastern Conference, and it's like, okay, the Celtics are the Celtics. The Bucks a little shaky defensively, but they're still the Bucks. The Heat are the Heat, as we established. And oh, by the way, in their 4 playoff runs, they've been higher than the 5 seed just one time, which means they're doing what they're doing despite not having home court advantage in the first round, but once. And if the Heat are playing the Cavs in round 1, for example, if it's like the 3-6 matchup, so to speak, they're not going to favor the Cavs over the Heat. They're not going to favor the Cavs over the Knicks. They're not going to favor the Cavs over majority of the teams that they're probably going to see, except for maybe Philadelphia if Joel Embiid's injured. Like, they're a team that, like, they have to be commended for what they're doing. They've had significant injuries, Darius Garland to Evan Mobley, and Donovan Mitchell's missed some time. And I think they're a good team. But when you put up playoff profile, playoff resume for the Cavs against these other teams, the Heat, the Celtics, the Bucks, the Knicks, and potentially the Sixers if Joel Embiid gets back, although their playoff profile is not great either. Yeah, the Cavs are not a team that I would feel good about backing in the playoffs.
Yeah, and conversely, as you outlined, the Heat just have all of those things in their favor. We didn't even mention Eric Spoelstra as a coach, and they just seem like they have the highest ceiling.
Yeah,
So.
they have the best playoff coach in the league, who is a psycho, who when they lose, they didn't have Tyler Hero for the entire run of going to the Eastern Conference Finals and then the finals and, playing the Denver Nuggets. It didn't matter that Tyler Hero wasn't there. Tyler Hero hasn't been there the last couple of games, and it hasn't mattered because now it's like, all right, Hero's not there. Cool. Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier, Caleb Martin, Jaime Jaquez in your eye hole. Like, it doesn't matter. They just sort of regenerate, I don't even know
they reload.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
There you have it. It's a ticket that you have punched for the Heat. Bryan Fonseca, thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Over to men's college basketball. The marquee game tonight is number 11 Auburn taking on number 4 Tennessee. 63% of bets and 68% of the handle are on Auburn plus 7.5. 66% of bets and 78% of the handle are on the under 151.5. And with that, we bring in Mike Calabrese. So the top of the SEC is pretty stacked. You have 5 teams with at least 10 conference wins, including Auburn and Tennessee. What do you make of this matchup?
Well, I've learned my lesson. Stay away from betting against Auburn when they're playing in the jungle. That home court advantage is fierce, but when they take their show on the road, things seem to fall apart. You look at their last meaningful road game at Florida. As a team, they shot just 3 for 17 from three-point range, and they need that perimeter input to be able to beat a quality team like Tennessee. And Auburn, they still don't have it from the guards. I will believe it when I see it. They don't get consistent scoring from their starters. Denver Jones, KD Johnson off the bench can be up and down. Jones in particular struggles to shoot on the road. So for that reason, I'm keeping my money on the sideline here, although I have a suspicion that Tennessee may win this one going away.
All right. Interesting. And Auburn currently tied with South Carolina, just 1 game back of Tennessee in the SEC. Now let's get your best bet for tonight. Where are you looking?
All right, I go past one road team playing at a ranked favorite, and I can't help myself. I'm going back to one here. Seton Hall plus 8.5 at Creighton. We all know that Creighton shocked the world last week, upsetting number 1 UConn. But then they immediately drop a game to St. John's, proving that they're somewhere in between those 2 performances. Whereas Seton Hall has been a team that I think has a lot to offer. Kadary Richmond, in particular, has been on a tear. He's averaging 18, 7, and 6 across his last 5 games. As a stat sheet stuffer, he's somebody that they can hang their hat on. Seton Hall is also a top 50 defensive team across all the advanced metrics: KenPom, shot quality, Evan Maya, Haslametrics. And for that reason, I think they can hang around here. They already proved it earlier this season. 5 weeks ago, they took the Blue Jays to triple overtime, so they had every opportunity to win that game. And the last piece of it, I love circling spots when it comes to against the spread history. Creighton is the least profitable home favorite in the Big East dating back to 2020, just 21-30-2 against the spread. So Greg McDermott and his teams are just not all that formidable at home, at least against the closing number. I think this is off by about 4 points, and that's significant for me. So I'll take the Pirates plus 8.5.
I must admit, I am tailing you on this one, my friend. I look forward to this one. Seton Hall's been a super feisty team. By the way, you might know, if you're watching this, that Mike Calabrese is also on our podcast BBOC, and you guys are going to be previewing every conference tournament over the next couple weeks. Is that right?
That is correct. The MEAC, the A10, the Ohio Valley. We're going to touch them all and close them out with some of the major conferences. But shout out to all of my co-hosts, Greg Waddell, Mike Randall, all the guys from the 3-Man Weave. Couldn't do it without them. It's going to be some heavy lifting, but the audio listeners are going to be the beneficiaries. So make sure to check that out.
Absolutely. Have to. All right, Breeze, thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Remember, any picks we give out here on the show, you can easily reference by following green.daily in the Action app. We keep track so you don't have to. Another episode down for green.daily. I'm Maria Marino. Thanks a bunch for watching. I'm going to see you again Thursday at 3 Eastern on the Action Network YouTube channel and the Action app.